And now, here to tell you about the law of retention is our teacher, Dr. Bruce Wilkinson.
How do you take information that you want a person to have and turn it and reformulate it so that it goes right in that person's mind and they remember it, listen now, without trying to remember? How can you speed teach? How can you take information that you want a person to have in their mind and put it there so that they're not even paying attention, and then they discover, oh, I know that, and they know it? We're going to give you some of the ways that God does that with us. Isn't it remarkable? Isn't it remarkable that he said after the flood, I'm going to put up in the what? In the sky. What was it? So you won't. Well, isn't that interesting? You mean God himself wants to lock some things in his memory and my memory, and he uses a picture to do it. I wonder what would happen if you used pictures in your teaching to cement memory. I doubt if any one of us sat and concentrated, remember, the next time I see a rainbow, God said no more flood. Let's review that 10 times. Why don't you do that? He used a picture, and pictures have a way of going right in your head, and you got it. He also uses other methods, and before this law is over, you're going to know the main methods the Lord uses in teaching for retention, and then you can take those methods and apply them to any amount of information you want to put in a person's head. Pick which one of these methods he used out, use it on this content, and it'll go right in the person's mind. Now, it's important for all of us to realize this law isn't for every time you teach. This is kind of like a special tool you have. And when you want to say to yourself, this is a part of some information everybody needs to know, then you go back to this law and use it, and you'll be shocked at how well it works. Now, I would like to show you a picture. This is a picture we've had drawn, and I'm going to give you only 30 seconds to look at this picture. And then I'm going to ask you some questions. Please do not take notes. Do not say anything. Just look at the picture. On your mark, get set, go. I'm going to ask some questions now, and I'm going to ask Mary Lee right on the front row to put little check marks on her sheet of how many things you have learned in 30 seconds. Is there a person in the middle of the picture? A man or woman? Old or young? Standing or sitting? Does he have something in his hand? Yes or no? What does he have in his hand? What color is the apple? How many apples does he have? What is he doing with the apple? Is he standing on a bench or a chair? Is it a metal chair or a wooden chair? Is there somebody standing next to him? Boy or girl? Old or young? Is he doing anything? Oh, he's just standing there. That's right. What's right next to him by his feet? A dog. Is the dog facing this direction or this direction? Is his mouth open or closed? What's right here in the air? A cat. What color is the cat? Is the cat on the ground or in the air? What direction is the tail facing? Up or down? Up. That's right. What's right here? A bird cage. Are there any birds in it? How many birds? What color is the blue? Is the bird facing this direction or this direction? That's right, it's facing this direction. Okay, what's right here? A window. Is the window open or closed? Is there anybody in it? Man or woman? Old or young? Are there blinds or curtains? Curtains. Are the curtains closed or open? Does the woman have anything in her hand? What does she have in her hand? What kind of pie? An apple pie. That's that's great. What's right here? Swings. That's right. How many? 2. Are there anybody on them? How many? Boy or girl? Are they straight up and down or swinging? That's right. Now, what's across the bottom here? Above the flowers. A porch. Is it a cement porch or a wooden porch? Is the wood going this direction or this direction? This direction. That's great. What's across the bottom? Are they open or closed? What color are the leaves? What color are the petals? What color is the middle? Yeah. How many are there? That's great. What's right here? A turtle. That's right. Is a turtle's got its head in or out? Is there anything on the back of it? Yes. How many letters? What color are the letters? Yeah. And what does it spell? APL. Let's stop and ask Mary Lee. Mary Lee, how many questions did we ask? 58 questions. Now, how long did I teach that picture to you? 30 seconds. 58 facts. 80% of you got at least 50 of those facts. The average teacher, now hold on to this. The average teacher teaching for an hour, 50 minutes, teaches 10 facts or less. What do you mean by that? I mean, at the end of the hour, if you gave a quiz and see how many facts the class knows 10 new facts or less for a whole hour. I have a feeling that could be improved. And here's a method in which we took one picture. Now, here's how we would normally done. The name of today's lecture is The Old Man, the Grandfather on the Porch. Roman numeral number 1, the old man. Capital A. The man is sitting, small 1. He's sitting with some blue coveralls on, number 2. He's sitting on a yellow chair. Number 3, he has, see how we would have done it? And you'd have written 5 pages of notes. Right? It would have taken a whole hour. We showed the same thing in a picture. Where did we get the idea? The rainbow. The rainbow. I don't want you to forget this. Every time you see it, you have it. We're going to teach you how to do those and the other methods that are involved in that particular approach. Because, friends, I want you to know the earth is not flat. The earth is not flat, and you don't have to teach 10 facts an hour anymore. You see, people come to our classes as happy apples. Their funnels are open. And what happens is we begin to lecture, and the words come pounding in through our little funnels, and they come in, and they keep coming in, and they keep coming in, and they keep coming in, until finally you have a stuffed apple. Let's expand on this concept by taking a look at the retention maxims, 7 principles that lie behind teaching so that your students will really know the content. We're going to deal with some critical issues that lie right at the heart of what it means to be a teacher. You may discover that a number of these concepts make you uncomfortable. They may even challenge some of the sacred cows that seem to flourish in the teaching community. Think back a moment to the law of the learner. The law stated that you are responsible to cause your students to learn. In the law of retention, we're going to build upon the law of the learner to the point that you are responsible not only to cause your students to learn, but to learn the content. And if they haven't learned the content, then you have not caused them to learn. So let's get on with our 7 maxims, 7 big ideas, 7 principles about how to teach so people can really learn. Maxim number 1. Retention of facts by the student is the teacher's responsibility. The teacher's responsibility. If you have ever attended a Walk Through the Old or New Testament seminar, you may remember your instructor saying to you that he was going to take the responsibility of teaching you the material. And from that point, he willingly shouldered the responsibility of working with you in such a way that you learned the material. It was his job. It's been my experience, though, in my entire student years, that it's a rare teacher who really carries the responsibility of causing their students to know the facts. Instead, teachers everywhere seem to have this tendency to come into class and then to dump all this content on those poor, unsuspecting students. Maybe like this picture right here. There's the teacher coming in and just pulling the lever and dumping the content. Now look at the delight on the faces of those students. You know how it works. The teacher gives page after page after page of content, and you're out there writing furiously to keep up. And what do we do with those notes? They kind of lay around in our homes until the night before the test. And then it's your job as a student to try and learn the content for the first time.
You see, if you haven't learned it, then had that teacher taught it to you? Obviously not. Number two, the second retention maxim states that retention of facts is effective only after they're understood. After they're understood. It constantly amazes me how many times I meet a student studying for class and find out they have absolutely no idea what they're learning. But they know it's required on the test and I just need to know it. Just last week, I overheard some high school students talking to each other about a math class in which they said only 2 of their whole class understood what was going on. And one of them had hired an outside tutor. You should have seen their frustration as they threw up their arms and said, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to pass this class. The teacher just gives us more and more material, and none of us knows what's going on. Do you know what that teacher thinks? What's in his head? He thinks it's his job to be a delivery boy. And when he's finished covering the course textbook, then I guess I finished my job. It makes really no difference to him if 28 of the 30 students have no idea what's going on. Are you sensing the absolute revolution it would cause if that teacher would just change his mind about what teaching really is? Well, time for maxim number 3. Maxim number 3 is retention increases as the student recognizes the content's relevance. Notice the second word of that maxim. Retention increases as something happens. That is, the student learns faster and deeper to the degree they feel that the material is important, that it's relevant to them, or is at least relevant to something or someone. So many of our poor students are struggling up this overwhelming mountain of content, hoping that the planes of relevance are on the other side. How many times have you, personally, sat in a class as a student and thought to yourself for the entire hour, week after week after week, what good is any of this for anyone? And when one of your friends, in the back row probably, had the nerve to raise their hand and ask the teacher, you know, why should I know this? Don't you remember what the teacher did? The teacher jumped all over them as if they've committed the unpardonable sin. You know what happens to learning? Learning sinks to the basement if the student doesn't think it has any practical value. I'll never forget the day when our son was having a tough time with math. And I was helping him one night and showing him how percentages were so important to life. And I was showing him how I was using percentages. I'll never forget it. He was real little then. He turned around and said to me, you know, Dad, I didn't know percentages were for anything but school. Friends, I could have shot the teacher. She had never got the point that it was her responsibility to help all of her students realize how relevant to life her content was. There was a student who thought the only value for percentages was to take the test on Friday. I have a feeling we may do the same thing with the Bible. Many people go to church thinking that what they learn there should stay there. It's not the point, though, is it? It's what they take away from church that's truly important. We have Walk Through the Bible have a slogan for that. It simply says, the Bible. It's not just for church anymore. Well, let's move on. Maxim number 4. Maxim number 4. Maxim for number 4 states retention requires the teacher to focus on the facts that are most important. Believe it or not, all facts are not created equal. But if you listen to the average teacher, one who gives between 4 and 8 pages of notes each class hour, you'd think that they were, that each piece of information was equally important as the other. Well, if you're going to teach people to really memorize the material, then you're going to have to take the responsibility of separating the material into an important pile and an unimportant pile. How foolish we are when we treat it as if it's one pile and handle our content as if students should know all these facts. In a sense, what we need to do is become sifters of the information. Wouldn't it be great if right here, right in front of me, right here in a flash, a content sifter would just appear? Some kind of ancient magic machine uncovered in the halls of learning that actually enables you to sift the content, to know what you should teach and what you shouldn't teach? Well, we've been looking for one for a while, and we found one. In fact, undoubtedly the only one in existence. Well, what do you think? And this bucket right here. This, my friend, represents unsorted and unsifted content. I mean, look at this stuff. This is the stuff that makes for a great content dump. I mean, just pour it all over those poor students. You know why? It's not your problem, it's their problem. Unless, however, you're teaching students to learn the content, and then it's your problem. Well, see, look in here for a minute. Look at this content. Look at that. There's some gold nuggets in here. There's some silver in here. There's also a lot of dirt in here. Now, why do we waste time with the dirt? Why do we give as much time to the silver as to the gold? I mean, you're the teacher. Prioritize the content for them. Spend the majority of the time in class on the part you know is the gold, the part that's extremely important. And someday, if you have enough courage, stand before your class and tell them this content, this dirt, pick up the dirt, is irrelevant and no one needs to know it for the test. But my friends, watch out. You might have to pick some of your students right off the floor. They may have fainted in disbelief. You see, they're used to the hide-and-seek game of teaching. You know, the teacher hides the content until the test, and then the student hopes to find it. Let's go back to our content sifter. Remember, Maxim 4 states that it's your job as the teacher to focus on the facts that are most important. Now let's take this unsifted bucket of material that contains valuable information as well as worthless information. You know, the 6 or 7 pages of material that you were planning on dumping them in next class. Let me show you how this works. You dump the content on the top. Sometimes I dump bucket after bucket after bucket in there because I have so much material I could teach. Well, let's see how it works. Let's try it. Let's shake it and see what happens. Look at that. I mean, it just did it. But did you recognize that I'm the one who's doing the shaking, not the students? I'm the one who's supposed to do it before I teach. I do it before I start teaching. Now let's see what happened with all this bucket of content I had. Let's take a look in the first grid, grid A here, and see what we have. Well, look at that. We got some big pieces, some gold, some good stuff. Now, what's in the next one down below it? Well, look at that. It has a smaller grid. It has a lot more pieces in it, some pieces of silver. They aren't as valuable as the gold, but there's quite a few of them in there. I guess by now, you probably already know what's in the next one, don't you? Yeah, some copper. Look at all that. But the question is, let's get to the bottom. Let's get to the bottom line of teaching. There it is. What's down here? Whoa, look at all that. I can't believe it. Look at all that dirt. All that was my material that I was so excited about. It fell all the way through A, B, C, right down to the bottom. Now, how do you think we should think about this content? It's important, but it's not important for the Sunday school class that I'm going to be teaching. But if I was teaching the same material right here to a graduate level, much more in depth, you know, I wouldn't be using the same grids. I'd have a much tighter grid. And the same material, same content, go down to, but some of it would stick here. Some of it would stick here. Why? Because the difference, you know, who you're talking to and what you're talking about and how much time you have determines what kind of grids you're going to use. But you know what? If I hadn't used this sifter, I'd have spent a lot of my class time presenting to my students all this dirt. No wonder the students leave frustrated. You know how I think, though, about these 4 levels? Maybe I'll give you some other ideas. I have these different grids in my own mind. What if I take content, material, and say to myself, you know, is this important or not? I sift it through different ideas in my mind. Gold, silver, copper, dirt, or that's really a hot idea. That's pretty warm, that's cool, that's freezing. Or maybe you need to know, nice to know, who knows, and who cares? But it's the top one. And I hope by now that you know what really we've been calling this top one. The one that has the gold in it. We call it the irreducible minimum. This is what you, the teacher, must spend your time in class teaching and reviewing over and over again until everyone gets it. You know, teach for the gold. You've heard of going for the gold. Well, we believe you ought to teach for the gold. Well, what should you remember? What should you take away from this sifter? Well, let me give you a couple of them. Number one, always remember that you're responsible to shake the sifter. Never again just get that big bucket of content and throw it at them. Number two, always use what your sifter taught you. Always clarify for your students from now on, hey, this is the gold. This is extremely important. Don't ever again make them waste their precious time studying something you know isn't important, but they're not quite sure. And lastly, if you really want to be a master teacher, always teach from the top down. What's left in the top bin? The gold, the irreducible minimum, where the gold remains. That's the heart of the lesson. It's the gold. It's the essence. It's what a person must know to say that we know. Remember then, we call this the irreducible minimum. If you took any more of this away, the person wouldn't know. If you added anything to it, it's more than they need to know. And you know what, friends? The real sifter is you. You're the sifter. You don't need one of these. So remember, from now on, take up your bucket and pour it through your sifter and watch the magic begin. And isn't that how God sifted through history? In fact, maybe that's why the book of Genesis skips literally hundreds of years of time without even one verse revealing what happened in that time. And then all of a sudden spends chapter after chapter on Abraham, just one person, revealing detail after detail of his life. God skipped centuries and then wrote about minutes. Why? Because he was sifting history for us. Or why in the four Gospels do we see dozens of chapters relating to what happened during the last week of Christ's life, covering just 7 days? And we don't know anything about what happened between Jesus' 12th birthday and all the way until he turned 30. That's another sovereign act of sifting. Well, friends, if God practiced it, then why don't you? You see, master teachers know what to cut out, and ineffective teachers want to leave everything in. Let's move back over to maxim number 5. Retention arranges the facts so they're easy to memorize. Retention arranges the facts so they're easy to memorize. In other words, if you are responsible to cause your students to learn the content, to memorize the material, then you should arrange those facts so they're easy for your students to learn them. For instance, let's say this is your material, your content, your subject. And here's all the material you want to present in a class period. Now the question is, how are you going to present this to your class? Here's how some teachers seem to do it. They just kind of throw it out there in front of the class. They do a content dump. Other teachers come along and they take the next step. They organize their content so it kind of makes sense. You know, Roman number 1 right here. Capital A, capital B, let's say. Roman number 2. And Roman number 3. And small a. Small a. And small r, small b. There it is. And you know what? That's helpful, isn't it? and it puts it in a good beginning. But you know, although that looks neat, how many of those letters could you name right now? I mean, can you remember? In other words, although you saw them, although I presented them to you, did you really learn them? Although I gave you the material, did I cause you to learn them? Let me see, how many are there? 7 of them. How many of them can you remember? You see, just outlining the material does not necessarily make it easy for the student to memorize it. All it does is it makes it easier to understand it. As a teacher, why don't I just take a minute? And after I've gotten my content together, why don't I come back around to that same content and work with it a little bit? You know, arrange those same facts so they're easy for you to remember them without even thinking about it. Take these same letters and play with it for a minute. L, E, A. Have any idea where we're going? There it is. It's learner. Now, can you name those seven letters now? Yeah, it's almost ridiculous. It's so easy. Well, why did that just work? It worked because we organized the material in such a simple way that without even thinking about it, you saw the word learner. Tell me the letters. Well, of course I can tell you the letters without even thinking. You see, my friends, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take your content, not only organize it, but then rearrange it to finally say, oh, that's a simple way to do it. All right? Maxim number 6. Maxim number 6 states that retention strengthens long-term memory through regular review. It appears that God has created man with an ability of a short-term memory and a long-term memory. We use short-term memory all the time. When your spouse asks you to pick up three things from the store, or a friend just shouts across the parking lot to call her tonight and tells you their number out loud and you don't have a piece of paper in your hand, what do? You say it to yourself a couple times and you have it. At least you have it for that night. You see, unless that content gets moved from the short-term memory, let's picture it in the front of your brain, back to the long-term memory, you haven't caused your students to learn the material. Maxim number 7 states that retention minimizes time for memorization in order to maximize time for application. When you practice the law of retention, you'll become more and more skilled in speed teaching your students. You'll soon be able to teach twice the material in half the time, so effectively that all of your students will master the content. Well then, what's the summary of all we've been talking about? What's the definition for the law of retention? Well, it's simply 3 words. 3 words. Master the minimum. Master the minimum. The teacher should enable students to enjoy maximum mastery of the irreducible minimum.
I'd to explain that a little bit. There's 2 words in that definition that need explanation. One is the word minimum. That is, the teacher needs to pick out of all the possible information, those pieces of information that everybody needs to know to say you know. That's the minimum. To say you understand, this is the part you got to know. That's the minimum. But then the first part of it is you need to help them master the minimum. That is, that everyone in the class learns that amount of it. I remember when I was teaching college, there was a class I taught that was a content class. That is, it was supposed to survey the entire scripture to freshmen to teach them the basics. And I did that. I identified the basics and said to them, if you attend the class and you're here every day, I will teach you the facts, and you will learn the facts, and you will get an A on the final. And the final will not be easy. So by the time that semester came back to a close, the day before the final came, I had the people stand up. And I said, guys, I want to hear the full review. And I sat down. And I took off my watch and started counting. They started at the beginning in unison. That's years ago. Bible, 66 books, 2 parts. Old Testament, 39 books. New Testament, 27 books. Old Testament, 3 parts. They did it in unison, and I counted the minutes that went by in unison. They sat down, screaming and yelling, 27 minutes later. I gave out 6 pages on the final exam, single-spaced. Every single person got an A. The academic dean got the grades, and he called me and said, Bruce, there's no way everybody in your class got an A. I said to him, Joe, can I show you the final, and just to see if you think it was too easy? He said, sure. I said, okay. I gave him the 6-page final. I said, Joe, what do you think? He said, what is this? This is the final in the freshman class? Yeah. Joe, just check it out. You gave this? Bruce, this is harder than seminary. They knew all this? Yes. Do you think I should fail a few? Now, my friends, that's the way it ought to be. There was no threat of the test. Those kids loved it. I loved it. Why'd they love it? Why'd they love it? Because there was learning. Because finally, one teacher came along and said, hey, I love teaching. I love helping you learn. And from now on, you're learning it.